Good evening and welcome to the Chaska City Council meeting for Monday, August 19th. Call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Will you please stand and join me in Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, good evening. Nate, we call roll, please.
Yes. Councilmember Hatfield.
Here.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Here.
Councilmember Wong.
Here.
Councilmember Grau.
Here.
And Mayor Winchell.
Here. Moves us to item 4, adopting the agenda. Are there corrections or additions to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to. Sorry.
This is the revised agenda with the 7D now, and 8C is the financial reports, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Wang, second by, I didn't hear.
Me.
Councilmember Hatfield to adopt the agenda. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. Motion carries. Moves us to item 5, visitor presentation. Is there anyone here under visitor presentation? Yes, sir. Come on up. I need your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Marty America, spelled like the country, and I live at 3680 Edge Hill Road.
Okay.
I just wanted to call to your attention that I live on the street at the edge of town, it's near Lano's Sand and Gravel, if you know where that is. There are 8 houses on our street, and we still don't have sewer or city water. And just kind of wondering why. I know that some of the improvements that you're doing in the streets around here, they're getting their second sewer pipes. And meantime, we're drinking well water and dealing with our septic system. So we're probably the last of the last subdivision that doesn't have city sewer or water. And I'd just like to try to get the ball rolling in that direction. I don't know which one of you represent my street, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention and see if there's something we can do about that.
Well, I don't know who wants to.
I could talk
Go ahead.
about
I
it. So,
just that you know that section was annexed into town. So
Yeah,
it was
I
always-
know, but when, do you know when it was annexed?
That would have,
2004.
yeah.
Okay,
So that's
Yeah.
why it's one of the.
right.
So it was annexed in the same time that we did, well, it was actually a little after we did the initial plans for what was at the time called Heights of Chaska. So that's the whole entire southwest Chaska area that's up above the hill that's being sort of developed now. And so as part of that plan, none of the area in the old Chaska Township had sewer provided to it. And basically the plan that we created for, now we call it the Southwest Chaska Plan, basically creates a plan for how sewer actually gets extended to each of the areas of that, of the Southwest Chaska Plan, including your area.
Okay.
The challenge with your area is it almost has to be last because of where it lies. There is no infrastructure that actually goes up to that point, and
Right.
because it's sort of in the middle of the bluff, it's one of the most difficult places to actually get to. And so that's actually one of the things that we're analyzing now, is going through and looking at, is there different alternatives for us to be able to provide sewer down there so that it would be not as expensive as it would be to go up the hill, because going up the hill, we'll have to put lift stations in, which are super expensive to do.
Right.
So it is something we're looking at, and it is part of the overall plan for the Southwest Chaska area. I can tell you it's something that probably is not physically possible immediately, but it is something that we're planning on.
Does the sewer extend to the Schramm House, the new brewery?
Yes, it goes, that actually goes off of the line that's actually on 140, and the elevations actually allow it to do that in the distance from 140. The issue ends up being is the farther you get away from that, there's just not enough gravity to be able to carry it over that way.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it is definitely something we continue to look at, and we actually had a conversation. We had a conversation with the city of Carver actually recently to see, does it even make sense to look at some type of a shared sewer service agreement if they could serve it better than us. So it is something that we're exploring.
Okay. Well, anything you can do, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? There's one thing.
Obviously, I was wrong about the fire department. They're not here.
I see that. But that's all right.
Yeah.
Matt, I do have a question for you, and the fact that we all received a letter that was in the Herald about the gazebo in City Park.
Yep.
Can we go over and just discuss kind of what's happening and what the outlook is for repairs there? I know that staff has had a conversation a little bit about what we know now is that it's gonna need major repair. And do we look at, what are we all looking at? I know that we had a study and one was talking about we need public toilets somewhere available and things like that. Could you just maybe touch on that? I've been getting some conversations, I don't know if the rest of the council's been getting some conversations about the condition of the gazebo. So maybe, I thought, as long as we got this letter, it's a good time to maybe have that conversation.
Yeah, this actually goes back to, we had talked about at our last work session, was our capital improvement program that we established 4 years ago now, where we basically had $1 million additional dollars each year going into our general fund to support improvements like this. So clearly, City Square Park is one that it's almost 30 years since it's been renovated the last time, and clearly is in need of renovation. The gazebo is not in the greatest shape, but quite frankly, a lot of the elements in the park aren't in the greatest of shape anymore. The landscaping, pavers, the fencing around the edge, all kinds of things. Because of that, it's actually scheduled for our CIP in I didn't get a chance to talk to Brian today, but I believe it was 2020 and 21. We had $500,000 each year going towards it, so $1 million total. What we'd probably do is we'd do it all as one project and then come in and do things, and then we'd have to see, is there additional improvements that need to occur there? Because it's such a centerpiece of our community, one of the things I think we're gonna wanna do with any type of improvement like that is to be able to have some kind of a process around it, to be able to talk about what is it that at the end of the day are things that we think are missing from there, would enhance it. I mean, one of the things that I hear consistently down there is we don't have bathrooms, we don't have a sound system that's great. The trees, there's some trees that aren't in the best of shape. The grass doesn't grow great because the canopy of the trees is the way it is. Landscape pavers, I hear people even talking about that the location of the gazebo isn't necessarily conducive to having band concerts. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can look at down there. I think the key is that we have identified City Square Park in the capital improvement program for funding for, like I said, I think it's next year and the year after, the 2 years that Brian allocated dollars towards it. But it's no doubt that it needs to get done, and there are dollars that are allocated coming up.
So if we're looking at doing it next year, would we start this group to look at what our needs or functions are there this winter? Or are we thinking more that this is probably gonna be 21?
Well, initially what we had talked about is it would make some sense to do it at the same time that the redevelopment is going on across the street, so that you could sort of tie things together there as far as what type of amenities you'd have in each, so that they're complementary and not contradictory to each other. And try to do the road construction all at the same time, so everything's just done at once, instead of having one year we do the park, the next year we do 41, the next year we're doing this and 4th Street. That's something we can give some more thought to, is, when does it make the most sense to do it? To me, the key is that we've allocated dollars to it. That, to me, that's the first and most challenging thing, is getting the dollars. Now it's just a matter of when does it make most sense to do it, and what process should we use to go through and do something.
Well, if we can kind of start looking at things, that'd be great. I think we're starting to, it is very noticeable that things are starting to deteriorate on it, and what is the best steps, so.
I was telling these guys one time at River City Days, I went and I leaned on the railing and the whole railing came off. I mean, there's no doubt that that, and it's, again, it's more than just a gazebo. People, you know, the gazebo is obviously the symbol to everybody.
But
of-
the trails
of
are
our-
bad,
But
like I said.
everything over there needs work.
All right. Any other comments from anyone? All right. Okay, I do have one other thing here. I did receive a letter from Craig Bowman, the head of Chaska baseball coach. I think I'll just read it right here. I'm gonna read it somewhere. Dear Mayor, Wind Shuttle, and council members, on behalf of the Chaska High School baseball team, we would like to thank you for your continuous support of the Chaska High School baseball program. We are honored and proud to have the opportunity to play at Chaska, to play our Chaska High School home baseball games at Athletic Field and Sunset Field in Chaska. This baseball year was another great year for the field and our team. As you're aware of, this year with the weather, there were challenges, yet public works staff was great and did a tremendous job. What a great year for Chaska baseball ship. The partnership with the city of Chaska and high school is great. Playing on this field is a privilege for our players and is a real tribute to the community feel we have in Chaska. We are proud to be Chaska Hawks and proud to be part of the pride of Chaska. We would like to again, this year specifically, thank Public Works staff for all their field maintenance efforts, especially Athletic Park, the Park and Rec staff for their programming efforts, and the city administration for their overall administration support and positive encouragement in the baseball field usage process. We thank you again for your support, respect, and trust, which has provided us the privilege and opportunity to play on these wonderful fields. We hope that we can continue to have this great relationship in the future. Look forward to the ongoing partnership between Chaska High School and the city of Chaska. Sincerely, Craig Bowman. So just wanted to share that. So good to see, good to get. Don't always get nice letters like that, so. All right, last call on visitor presentation.
You know, one quick thing on the Hawks, the feeling is very neutral with the Public Works Department too, because those kids are out there helping them and doing things like when we were getting ready to flood, they were down there and picking up everything and putting it up in the bleachers and stuff. So they are a very good user group too.
Yeah, yep, that's good. Good stewards of the field.
Yep.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to approving previous meeting minutes. And we have two from the 7:15 meeting, wasn't at our last meeting. So there's a 7:15 and the 8:05 meeting. So again, if there are no corrections or additions, I would entertain a motion to approve previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Taylor. Hubbard. Man, why do I struggle with that?
Old Mother Hubbard.
There, I can't say that. Second by
Second.
Councilmember Grau to approve the previous meeting minutes. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries. Moves on to item 7, consent agenda items that need our approval but not necessarily conversation, but we can. So with that, questions on anything?
I would like to actually talk about 7C, Chaska Parks and Recreation proposed naming policy.
Okay.
Actually hoping maybe we have a good conversation a little bit about it. It's a pretty meaty document. I would, I see Marshall's out there. I thank the park board for putting that together. It was something we started conversations when I was on the committee, because it actually spurred a little bit of, we had Sunset Park, as you just referenced, and we had to name that, and truthfully struggled as a organization to really figure out how to name things. And so I thought it was well put together. The only questions I had, I guess I'll open it up for any other questions or comments. I do have one question specifically about that, but I can yield the floor if anyone else has comments about the policy first.
If you want, we can pull it off the consent and put it on a regular agenda item.
I don't have any concerns. I don't think we have to. I just was, like I said, it's a pretty meaty document, so I just wanted to take the time, and like I said, I had one clarifying question about it. I don't know if we have to pull it off.
Just
the
go
consent.
with it then.
So my question is, there is some conversation on like section B, item 3 about renaming or changing a name, which I think is adequately addressed. The one question I have is, we call this a policy. Now, if how does that really play into things? So if in a situation it's a policy, if a policy is not followed, is there, or can it not be followed? Obviously it sets out some situations where you change a park name. If like, say, the council chose not to do that, is there anything stopping them, formal or not formal? If it's more of a guideline or versus a
Yeah.
ordinance is maybe what I'm thinking.
Yep, I would say that, policy is a guideline. It's setting in place a process, a suggested process that's been given some thought to say, okay, if you ever find yourself in this position, what process has a group spent a considerable amount of time thinking about this is the best way to go about it. So I think that's the strength of a policy, is that that people have given some serious thought to it. But a policy is not an ordinance, and so a policy is just that. You can choose not to follow a policy, and there's no repercussion for that. Other than knowing that there's an official policy and that there is a process that's gone through to get to it. So what this policy anticipates is that these processes would, whether it's renaming or if it's memorial or those types of things, they would start at the park board level, that they'd make a recommendation to you guys as a council, and then you guys would make a decision one way or another based on that recommendation. But that doesn't mean with a policy that it has to follow that way. But the fact that, my experience has been if something's in policy and written down, typically people treat it pretty similar to how we treat ordinances or things like that, and that if they feel like it's not meeting their needs, then typically they'll change the policy before they go through a process.
Yeah, that's what I assumed, and I think that's fair. I don't think it needs to be anything more than that. I just was looking for some clarification on guideline policy versus an ordinance, and I think that's a fair approach. Again, I overall think it's a very well-written document. I commend the individuals behind that, and that's all I really had to say about that. Just clarifying.
I do have a question. And maybe, Marshall, you want to come up? My concern is under item, well, it's number 2, it says a substantial donation of money that has been made to change a name to name a park. I struggle with a substantial donation of money, because where does substantial is $1,000, but the park costs $100,000 to make? Is that substantial? And I'm just throwing this out here, and I don't know how we would move forward from here. But what if we put that as a donation, as a percentage, that if you want a park named after something or someone, what if there's a 50% matching donation to creating that park? Because I just worry if there's some sort of an incident where it's a tugger at your heart, and that park board is there and they get a donation of $2,000 and they change it, but it might cost $25,000 to $50,000 to do what we want to do.
And that happens a lot.
Well,
that happens more often than people come and pay for 50% of a park project.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just worry about that you're tying future generations of people that have to sit on a committee and make that decision. And I wonder if we put a percentage there, and I don't know if 50 is the right number, just floating in my brain.
Like a quantifier.
But I think it would make it easier as you move forward down the line. And I don't know, you were there, had the conversation, I wasn't. I don't know. Just
Maybe you
putting
could
it
just talk about, did the park board have any discussion about what constitutes significant?
We did, Mayor and Council, thanks, and I think that's a good question, and we actually were sort of intentional about that, because I think every situation is potentially gonna be different into the future, and we didn't necessarily want to, I
guess for lack of a better word, put ourselves in a box either. So I understand substantial. There's some interpretation that might go with it, but it allows the park board and the city council to have flexibility in determining what substantial might mean to you, what, now or into the future. And at that time, it may be that you put it towards a percentage. But if it's a small dollar amount, then the percentage might not,
But in someone
it
else's.
might not be a very
Someone
substantial.
else's brain, that's substantial to them, though. That's the whole thing. There's different interpretations, what's substantial to who.
Sure.
When you were looking at other ones, because you mentioned that you'd looked at other ones in the park board meeting, were, like, from surrounding towns, was there any, did they ever quantify that specifically?
There were
that you
some that
saw?
quantified, and then there were others that use this language of substantial as well. But
So I
I
guess,
mean, this is one of them, that just caught me really quick. And I just worry about, is it gonna put some people in a tough situation versus if you had a percentage? But I'll stop there, and I know Mike's got something, so.
so this kind of relates to the same thing. I mean, is because it's a policy, not ordinance, what's the risk of being in some situation where someone would say, well, there was a precedent set that someone else had gotten a park renamed for, $2,000. I want a park renamed after something else for, $1,000. There's kind of this, I know, just because someone just has a chip on their shoulder and wants to rename a park something for whatever reason, right? It's, it kind of creates this sort of open-ended liability, right? Because now it's like, well, it's what's substantial to you versus substantial to me, right? I guess I'm kind of wondering what's the possibility of litigation or, being in a position where suddenly it's so soft and because it's as a policy, it's not specific, so it creates a situation where someone can use that in a negative way.
I don't think it puts us in a legal risk, but it certainly puts us in, lack of a better term, perceptual risk. That, you treat one person differently than you do another. And yeah, I mean, $2,000 towards Miracle League field is a lot different than $2,000 towards
A neighborhood park.
a neighbor, well, or even a park bench or,
Yeah.
something like that. I mean, there's big differences in that. And you're right, I mean, you could address that by percentage because then, it's, then it doesn't matter what the actual cost of the project is. But it does box you in then too. I mean, it does.
I know, there's a,
Pros and cons.
One thing, sometimes what policies do is they'll put a suggestion in there, to give an example of what might be considered substantial. And, you could, you could put in a policy to say, keep just the language as it is, but then put in a suggestion to say, as an example, discussion during it said that, 40% or 50% was considered substantial. So it's not necessarily locking you in, but at least it gets people thinking along the right lines. I mean, if that's the direction you want to go, what I would suggest is that, consider adopting the policy, but then ask the park board to have some discussion about, hey, let's think a little bit more about what would we suggest, at least as a starting point for that, so that it's soft language in there, but at least it sort of gets people thinking along the right lines.
I'm good with that. Like I said, I'm just more worried about, a future park commission that has to make that decision. But I think that you could put something like that, because like I said, that helps people see what's a substantial donation, no matter if you put it like, say, if it's, the park's 100,000, you gotta put in,
51% or
yeah,
something.
or, well, just a dollar amount, $4 grand or whatever it is, or 40,000.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So if we approved it tonight with the recommendation that park board goes back and does that, would it come back as just another consent?
Yeah, we just have it come back as a consent with basically an amendment to the policy. Yeah.
Would you be open to that? I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, yeah, we want to
It
make
sounded
sure
like you
that,
kinda were torn which way to go.
yeah. I
And
think
I
it
don't-
makes
I don't-
sense.
You heard from a few, how do others?
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree that that was one thing that stood out to me too. And I think the park board was really passionate about doing this, and I think it's a great thing to have. And so we want to do it right, and
Yep.
kind of putting our stamp of approval, we're kind of like, this is what we want going forward. So I think we do it right, and that's a good.
Okay.
But I appreciate how much time you guys spent on it, 3 work sessions and all the time staff put into it. So I thought that was really impressive, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you for your support.
All right.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Marshall. Thanks for being here, too. All right, are there any other comments regarding this issue, or if we're this one or any other on the consent agenda? If not, I would look for a motion to approve all 3 items with the condition that they, yep,
Four items.
Before, they moved the one up, the massage.
That was the massage therapist.
You have an old agenda.
I have an old agenda.
Yeah, the online one.
Okay. So just approve the consent agenda as is, with that correction. I don't always get the current agenda here. All right, I'm not hearing anything. I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by
Yeah.
Councilmember Hatfield. Second. Second by Councilmember McGraw to approve the consent agenda with the addition to that item in the park naming policy. All right, further discussion. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moves us to item 8. No, I probably have this wrong.
Approval for final site build plan.
Okay, so I have, adoption of 2019-96, approving final plat, building plan for American Flexible Products.
Mayor, Councilmember, the item in front of you tonight, these are always, to me, the real fun ones when we see businesses expanding within our industrial park. Just to give you sort of a precursor before Liz starts talking, when we went through the original plans, and we continue to do this with industrial buildings, one of the things we highly encouraged businesses to do was to plan for their future. And that they didn't just buy a building that was big enough to be able to support what was on there, but that they bought a site that was big enough to be able to support some future expansion. And so with each one of those projects, what ended up occurring is there was, for lack of a better term, sort of a ghost plat that was approved as part of that to be able to set out what the future plans would be for an expansion, so that, you know, if another business was moving in, that they'd know here's what the future plans are for next door. But it also gave some assurances for the businesses who are moving in that, hey, if you're gonna go through the process of planning for the future, we're gonna help you plan for the future too. And so it gave them some certainty. And so the practice policy that we used was basically to go through that process, so that when they came in to do final approvals, really the only thing we needed to focus on is not so much the footprint of the building, but just making sure that the building looks like and is complementary to the existing building, and something that just doesn't stand out like a sore thumb. So that's the purpose of the action item tonight. American Flexible Products has been a business out in the industrial park for quite some time, and so we're happy to see them looking at expanding. So I'll turn over to Liz.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, members of the council and Mr. Mayor. We have a final site and building plan before us tonight for American Flexible Products. We're located at 124 Peavey Circle. So the site is highlighted on this aerial exhibit here. It is located in kind of more of our northern industrial park of the city, right off of Highway 41, which abuts the site on its western side. And then you'll basically take a right into Peavey Road and then go south on Peavey Circle to access the site. So on the south side, it also butts up against the Twin Cities and Western Railroad, as well as the golf course over there. So like Matt said, this property in particular did go through previous approvals back in 1998. And at that time, final site and building plan was approved for the American Flexible Products building. At that time, they showed a 32,000 square foot building with a possible 18,000 square foot expansion area, which totaled out at 50,000 square feet. And during those approvals, it was noted that when the building addition does come in, that they did have to go through their own final site and building plan process to allow it to be valid. So that's where we're at tonight with this request, is they are requesting final site and building plan for the building addition that's proposed on the site. So they did only build about 30,000 of the anticipated first phase square footage for the building. So with the building addition of 25,000 square feet that they're proposing tonight, they're at about 55,000 total square footage for the site. The height of the building proposed is 26 feet in height, and then along with the building addition, they will be adding on to their parking lot and installing 20 stalls as a part of that. Additionally, they'll be adding 2 loading docks on the south side of the building as well, which I'll highlight in a site plan. So in terms of the zoning that's approved out there and what currently sits, the use that they're proposing is consistent with that industrial zoning district. So here's the proposed site plan. So if we compare it back to the original approvals, it's in the same location that was originally anticipated. They definitely did fill in some areas where it wasn't originally anticipated, but the overall footprint and site impacts are basically the same that were initially approved. So the site that they're located on is the 3.75 acre site. As I've noted before, the 25,000 square feet that's going to be added is on the west side of the building. The original footprint is shown on the east side here in the fainter gray outline. So with that addition, they are adding, basically a majority of that will be warehousing space, but additional room for a break room and other bathrooms as well. The 20 parking stalls are proposed on the west side, so an extension to the existing parking lot just north of it that will just extend around the building, which again is very consistent with what we saw in the original approvals. The 2 loading docks are proposed on the south side of the building that will connect into that building addition back there. I've also included the landscape plan just to show you kind of the overall landscaping proposed for this. So they have some landscaping already in place out there when they put in the original footprint. So they'll basically be filling in overstory and understory trees and shrubs along the perimeter of the site and around the building with this building addition. And then in terms of the elevations that are proposed, so they will be matching the exact same material and even vendor and color that they originally used on their first building footprint. So they are just going to carry that through with this building addition, which is definitely encouraged by staff. The building addition will be 2 feet higher than what was originally built out there. And again, that's to kind of accommodate the warehousing space in the interior. One item to note is they are adding windows to the top portion of the building addition on the north and west facades, which are more of the visible elevations that you see from Highway 41. So that'll definitely be an added plus to the building to help break up the massing out there. So one thing they'll just have to show when they submit for building permit is that the mechanical equipment that is proposed on the top of this building addition will be screened from view or have a screening mechanism used. So with that, what they're proposing tonight is very consistent with kind of what was initially anticipated out here since 1998. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion tonight to adopt resolution number 2019-96, which is approving the final site and building plan for the building addition at American Flexible Products at 124 Peavey Circle, based on the conditions that are listed within that resolution. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we do have the applicants in the audience as well.
Is the plan to start this fall?
Yes, it is.
So really, once we do this, they just go? They're done?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
As a clarifying, because of that, because the original plan was approved with the expansion, that's why it goes right to final and we don't see a
Exactly,
conflict.
yep.
We just had that with who, well, with,
BioLife.
yeah.
Right.
BioLife. Same thing, so.
This one doesn't have residential backing up to
Right.
back of it.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah. So how many employees would this add? Good question.
Can you clarify the amount that it would add?
So right now we sit at.
You have to come up here, they won't hear it at home.
Good evening. I'm Carla Mathiasen. I'm CEO of American Flexible. Been there for 25 years. So I was there when we built this building. So right now we're sitting at about 36 employees. We figure max capacity with employees is going to be somewhere right around 70.
Oh, okay. Nice. It's doubling. What is American Flexible?
So we are a custom manufacturer of gaskets, seals, weather stripping, dealing with foam, sponge, rubber products,
Okay,
typically working with OEMs.
perfect, all right. Any other questions while she's up here?
Do you have any other locations?
Nope, this is our only location.
Glad you called Chaska home.
Yeah.
You know, the company started here where Nordic Track used to be. They actually tore down one of the buildings to build one of the Nordic Track buildings, and we've kind of bounced around and finally made a permanent home when we built the building, and we want to stay here for years to come.
Glad you stayed in Chaska.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's awesome. We love to see people reinvest,
yes.
you know, and put on, especially you're almost doubling.
Yeah,
so.
it's very exciting. And we are a 100% employee-owned company, which makes it even more special to everybody working there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, good, thank you. I appreciate you coming in.
Right. Thank you.
I do have one question. It's more of a technical question. So based on the proposed layout of the final that would be completed, the driveway extends to the north and then the driveway on the north wraps around the side of the new expansion, then it ends, and then there's grass in that spot with the proof parking in the middle where the grass is, right? And then on the back side, then there's like the loading dock, but there's basically grass abutting the building to that north end, right? How would fire access happen there if like they need to get into that north side of the building?
So they've kind of concluded that this backside area was good enough for their fire turnaround system that they needed. They basically concluded that they did not need a full fire turnaround the entire building, based on how they have it laid out here.
Okay.
They're fully sprinkled out, so
Yep,
that changes
and
a
that
lot
too.
of things.
Yep. Cool. That's all I got.
All right.
Anything else, or any other comments? Again, to me, it's one of the greatest things we can have, other than our initial build, is the ability to want to expand and build on their site. That's nothing better than, there's nothing better than that, so thank you for doing that. And,
Well, it's really, if you look at the industrial buildings up in that original park, over the last 5 years, we've probably had 10 companies
I know.
expand up there, which I agree. It's better than even a new company coming into
Yep.
town, because you've already built the base of people who are living here, investing in the community.
working here and
Yep.
not having to uproot them, and so, that's awesome. So I'm excited, I'm glad and ready to vote for it, so they
Can I-
can build it tomorrow.
Can I make a motion?
Absolutely.
I move to approve Resolution 2019-96, approving the final site and building plan for American Flexible Products.
All right, I have a motion by Councilmember Lang,
Second.
second by Councilmember Hubbard, to adopt resolution 2019-96, approving the final site and building plans for American Flexible. So, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good luck.
And thank you
for coming in.
Thank you for being in Chaska.
All right, that moves us on to adopt resolution 2019-97, resolution approving purchase agreement and approving and authorizing execution of supplemental compensation agreement and memorandum of understanding for property.
Mayor and Councilmember, the item in front of you tonight has to deal with 75 acres of property that's basically south of our levee, south of the River Woods neighborhood in downtown Chaska, so sort of over behind the courthouse. This item, and Nate will go through a presentation, really sort of two things. One of them is the use of a grant that we received from the state to go towards purchase of this property. But the other thing is to basically taking into consideration something that was not completed during the flood control project back in the early to mid 90s, which became an apparent obligation that the city had that was not completed during that initial flood control project. So Nate will be able to go through and talk about both of those and make a recommendation based on that. He wasn't an Eagle Scout.
I thought I'd be able to pull up the map.
Can you pull up the agenda?
There you go. This is what I was looking for. Thought I'd be able to zoom in. There we go. So, Mayor, council members, the property that we're discussing tonight is outlined in red on this map display here. So it's basically directly east of Courthouse Lake, over by the Carver County Courthouse Administration Building, on the opposite side of the levee. The east side of the property and the south side are both along the Minnesota River edge, and the other sides of the property are surrounded by land that the city owns on the opposite side of the levee. And then sort of surrounding that, then you see it's part of the larger Minnesota River recreation complex that's primarily owned by the DNR. And there's also U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service land, so it's a combination of those two. You see on this map, on this display, and this was done as part of a grant application that I'll get into, a number of different plants and wildlife populations that live in that area that were identified as part of that process, that are, you know, higher risk populations of those types of species.
Where's the river?
The river would be, and I can't tell you why it's colored this, but it's green.
So that is the river, okay.
Yes. Yes. This is the river.
I could give you a hand.
Yeah.
I thought that's.
I don't
what
want
it
to
was,
comment
but I
on the
wondered.
river condition, but yeah, it's green.
On the satellite image, it's green too.
Is it really?
Oh, jeez.
So to dive into the process here, the city was approached a number of years ago, it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago, by the Shallow family directly, asking to secure funding to support the acquisition of approximately 75 acres. So that's the parcel that's highlighted on the map. The family at that time had made the decision that, you know, they no longer desired to own the property. They are paying property taxes on it today, and that, you know, as a way to offload that family asset, it may make sense for the city to be in position to acquire it. And in the discussion at that point in time, it was really about, you know, applying together to receive some grant dollars through legacy funds, which we proceeded to do, and were successful in doing. The grant that we received from legacy funds at that time, and we still remain eligible to use those dollars, was $104,500. So that's what's available. We worked with and engaged with what are they called? The Conservation Fund to receive technical assistance in application for those dollars. And then the Conservation Fund also, after dollars are attracted and received for any sort of property acquisition of this sort for property preservation, they then proceed with working with the closing and working through the due diligence process and all of that kind of thing. So that's the assistance that we're continuing to work with them on. They'll bring us all the way to closing on the property, if this is approved. Through the negotiation, working with Conservation Fund and with the Shallow family, became aware that the property includes an easement access across the Army Corps of Engineers certified levee system. And although the Shallow family had not pursued improvements to that access easement prior to negotiating this agreement, the family asserted that it does hold that claim against the city in relation to the access. And so that access is approximately, goes, right through about here, extending off of what is 6th Street, north of the Courthouse Administrative Center, and basically going across the levee approximately here, and then they would proceed to access their property.
Is that the wrong side? Why am I confused?
No, the river's green, the,
River's here, the
city's
courthouse
on-
is here, this is Courthouse Lake.
But that is on the other side of the levee.
yeah, the levee's in between the lake and the property.
That's right. So at the time that the levee was built, the levee basically created or eliminated direct access to the property. And so at that time, the easement was created that goes approximately in this area to cross the levee and create a drivable access that the family could use. When this was built, it was farmland. And so the intent would have been to build that access had the family wanted that built at the time, so that the farm equipment could get over there and do its work, get the product out, and be able to do that. For whatever reason, it was not built at that time, and our records aren't clearly showing what was behind that decision. But the easement remains, and so the family is saying that they could elect to pursue building that access. They have the right to do that. The city has not delivered that up until this point. So recognizing that potential exists, what staff did was negotiate a payment in lieu of building that access. So essentially a driveway that would get out to the property. The estimated cost to build that is $135,000. So we've got $100,000 through the grant from the Legacy Fund that would be used to acquire the property. In lieu of building that access road, we estimate that road, the cost to build it is approximately $135,000. We would also pay the family that amount of money in lieu of actually spending those dollars on building the road. So the family would receive a total of $235,000 as a result of that. There's a $25,000, and this is the memo of understanding fee that goes to the Conservation Fund for their technical assistance, and then the city is able to keep $4,500 from that grant for administering the grant and covering some of the closing costs and things like that. So that's the general structure of the deal. So we've got $100,000 from the grant going to acquire the property. We've got $135,000 paying the family in lieu of building the road. So think of it as if the city did not purchase this property, the family could pursue requesting the city to build that road. The city would be obligated to do so. We would be spending that $135,000 to build a private access road and not acquiring any property. And that's kind of the structure of the deal.
I think the reality of it is and it's not the ideal situation. It sort of feels like the best of bad options, But the reality is that they have the right of an easement there, and they could force us to build that. If we put money into building it, now we're building it, and it doesn't really benefit them, and it doesn't really benefit us.
They want to get rid of the property,
Yeah.
right?
So it's a leverage point, no doubt, in the discussions, but we can't find record. I mean, this happened this would have been back in 1993, 94, long
Probably in
time
the
ago.
90s when they were building it.
Yeah.
Was it completed in
And
93?
why it never got built at the time, we cannot find any reason why. All that we know is that the easement's still on there, and the easement still requires us to build this.
Okay, so there's record of that. It's
Yes,
just-
there's
Okay.
record of that, but there's no record to say why it wasn't built to begin with. It could have been just a conversation to say, oh, don't worry about it, you don't have to build it. But the reality is that the legal document has stayed in effect. So the way we viewed this is to say, yeah, we don't necessarily like to go and include this as part of the discussion, but it's certainly a lot better to go in and use that dollars towards coming up with a public benefit of preserving that property in our greenbelt than to just build a road for nothing. So that's sort of the way we viewed it as we went through the discussion. And we did have an obligation at some point in time to actually build that, so it's an expense we should have had during the flood control project.
Yeah, but it's probably included in the project. So we did.
I don't know, that's hard to tell.
What, I thought there was conversation, this has been going on for a while. I thought the conversation was to get them, help them get a grant to get some money to get something for the property. And now all of a sudden, we're building a road or paying for a road?
No, they
What-
kind of figured out that they could get that plus that.
During
That's
the
what they figured
process,
out.
they figured out that they had this easement.
Yeah, they just
Yeah.
knew they could come into more money.
And you're
It's-
right, it did start out.
It started out that way, no doubt.
That way, yeah.
Well,
But I
where,
think
where
as
all
far-
of a sudden did this change? I mean, I don't get it.
I don't think it
What-
changed. I think what changed is they recognized they had the easement. The easement's always been there and has always been recorded, but I think what changed in the discussion is that they realized what value that easement had to them.
But that land, there's no value to probably today.
Yep.
It's underwater probably 80% of the time.
Yep.
So then why are we buying it?
Well.
I mean, I
yeah,
understand
so,
preserving greens.
you know, I will tell you, it was farmed in the past. They have had a logging company come down and actually look at, clearing that out. Now, the biggest concern of the logging company was access. Well, if they have access, there's potential that, it's their property, they could go down and actually do that. But this property was farmed prior to the levy.
So let's pull that thread a little bit. Is there like a building eligibility on this property?
No.
It's because it's part of the
This
greenbelt,
is
right?
yeah.
Yeah, you
Well,
It's outside of the levy.
Hold on.
Oh.
Yeah, it's because it's in the floodplain,
Yeah.
it's not, the greenbelt, would, if it was just purely that issue, there would be one building eligibility per 10 acres.
Okay,
But this is more because it's, in the floodplain.
okay.
So practically speaking, there's a little value, and of course, then the other thing is because of those grant applications indicates that there's also protected species, wildlife in that area. There would probably, even like best case scenario for someone who said, great, I'm gonna buy and build, that they'd still need to get approval from DNR to build because of those protected species.
Yeah, this wouldn't ever be an issue with building. This is an issue of using the
Be
property.
using it, right?
Yeah,
So
this is logging or farming.
Yeah, so even logging or farming, they probably would still need to get approval or would not?
I think.
Probably not too much.
Probably
Yeah, probably not too much, because, I mean, it's their property, these aren't native, plants down there because they farmed them. These are plants that popped up over the last 30 years since the flood control project occurred.
Okay. So what about like the DNR purchasing the property? Because I mean, it's in their, it's surrounded by DNR land.
That's why I think we have to look at these separately. The DNR could come in and purchase it, but they could still force us to put that road in.
The DNR could force us.
No, the
Oh,
family
the family
could.
could.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, their knowledge of we were unaware of the easement until we went through this process, and quite frankly, I think they were unaware of it too.
Isn't there some sort of negotiating point with them on this though? Because honestly, if we spend the money to put a road in, they're not gonna benefit from that. So isn't there some sort of no?
So basically.
No, I mean benefit wise.
Yeah, there's zero benefit to them for that $135,000. So, I mean, could we come back to them with, you can
This
get
is
part,
the,
but
this
not
is
all?
this is the discussion we've been having the last almost 2 years, is exactly that discussion. You know, part of it is that we had Stantec sort of do a quick and dirty estimate of what it would cost to put that road in. I mean, Matt Clark feels like it probably could cost more if we actually physically had to build it. Maybe not a lot more, but our biggest fear is that we go and we spend some money on something that provides no public benefit, and we're just forced to do it. That was our biggest fear in this process.
But that's on them too, though. I mean, that's a opinion of public opinion. If you're gonna be someone who forces a road to be built with no use, you gotta be willing to stand up and do that as well. I mean, I think.
Yeah. Nothing in the process had indicated to me that they would.
So basically, it's one of those things that they're gonna make us give up the money one way or another, either give it to the public for no use, or give it to them. That's for negotiation point, says you're gonna give it up anyway, that's their.
It's not,
It's setting them,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. The precedent it's setting.
Well, but keep in mind though, that the easement was part of the negotiation. So there's a pretty good argument to make that we don't know why it wasn't
Yeah, but
built.
they weren't going to financially benefit from that as a
Well, if they
whole.
would have farmed, they would have.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue, you know, part of the issue here is that this happened 30 years ago, and the only thing that survives is the legal document. And that's, you know, and the legal document is what creates the predicament for us.
Right.
So if we play it out the other way and say, let's say that, okay, they force us to build it, we spend, you know, over 150,000, go build an access, nobody uses it, they're still paying taxes for indefinitely.
Yep.
And which means that, well, you know, we'll probably never see the end of it, like in our lifetimes, we'll never see the value from it. But they're stuck with the land, no one's gonna be able to buy it or really use it for much unless they buy it for farmland, which is flooded out 3/4 of the year.
Well, the logger.
Or logging.
Loggers,
Might be a
but, you know,
better, more realistic.
And I think their intent when they had the loggers come in was to log it and then repurpose it as farmland.
Sure.
It's not uncommon, I mean, growing up in LeSueur, I saw this, it's not uncommon for farmers to have property in the floodplain that floods every few years. You know, that's some of the richest farmland. You give up your farmland every few
There's
years
crop
as it
insurance
floods,
and
but
things.
it's not uncommon to see farmland in the
Okay,
floodplain.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
So it's hard to say that they wouldn't actually, so it's difficult to say that if we didn't sign the agreement and that we built the access, that they wouldn't see it or wouldn't turn around and sell it because now it has access.
Well, they wouldn't be able to sell it because that's why they're talking to us in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, they could sell it, but, you know, the question becomes value. What value does it have to somebody else?
Well, I guess that what I'm saying is that they could basically force us to build the access and then sell it, because once it's with an access, then there's more value to a farmer or loggers or whoever.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you guys have been at this for a couple of years. So
Yeah,
I think you're probably at the best of the worst case scenarios. we can have,
I
so.
call this exactly that. This was, to me, what I consider the only scenario that we could draw up where there's actually some public benefit that comes out of it.
Where's the public benefit?
Well, I think preserving that property down there, it's not a whole lot different than the DNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife coming in and owning that publicly. You know, part of our comp plan says that we want to preserve those green spaces as green around, so.
That's pretty visible from like those trails and stuff, so even that is like, do you want people to have to look at logging and whatever? It's so beautiful back there if you've been on those trails that
The public benefit to us owning it is we know it's gonna always stay exactly the same way it is now.
Like I said, I thought we were negotiating the grant money to purchase the property, 100,000. That other part of it, Oh, boy, I struggle with that. That's holding us hostage.
I will comment that I don't see that family in the, out there. I guess it would be nice for situations like this to see representation from them. I mean, it's, you know, their choice, just a general observation. I know it's not, you know, they also know what they're walking into as well, but I just want to clarify and point that out because I think that speaks of character and just willingness to answer some questions because we're just trying to understand as well, so.
Do they live in Chaska?
Most of them do.
Yeah, most of them do.
A long time, lived in Chaska a long time. A lot of family members have been important. There's a park.
Well, what are your thoughts?
I'm with you. It's hard to, I mean, it's a bad situation that, because we're legally obligated. You know, do you not approve it? They force us to build a road, you call the bluff that they're not gonna be able to sell it. And then the PR that comes with making a city build a road that only benefits you and benefits someone else? Or do you, it's a sunk cost. We didn't record something we maybe should have recorded, which happens. And it's, at this point, it's really a sunk cost. You know, there's really nothing we can, it's a bad answer to a bad situation, but it's a answer.
That's the way, that's the reason, the only way I could sort this out in my mind is to say, the cost that goes into this road is a cost that would have had to been an expense at the time that the project was done, that we didn't have. But yeah, I mean, it is truly a sunk cost.
I mean, the cost per acre doesn't even bother me at the total cost, because it comes out to like, what, 3,000 an acre or something. I mean, that's actually pretty good for what it's worth when like the rest of town is, you know, like 60 something an acre.
But it's not
But it is not buildable, right? But it's more, I mean, what bothers me most is just the matter of principle, is that it's a negotiation tactic. I mean, that part really bugs me. I mean, I hate spending public money on something that's really, doesn't really have that value technically from a on the books value, because you couldn't sell that land for that amount. And it's I don't know, that really bugs me, but the same token, you know, it's one of those things where like, well, we get back the land, it's done, and that's out of our hair for good.
Yeah, I agree with John. It would have been beneficial to actually maybe see a family member or two here to kind of figure out why and ask a few questions, but again, also understand why they're probably not here. It is a hard pill to swallow, and I guess a learning lesson in the sense of, you know, the records and making sure that things are clear, but it's hard to justify that full amount should go to their profit. I have a hard time with that, so.
Okay, what's next?
I mean, I will say that if we don't go forward with this, basically our message back to them would be that we're not interested in purchasing it with that right along on there. And if they pushed us in a direction saying that we need to build that road, you know, we would be seeking legal options as far as, is there some kind of statute of limitation, or, which I don't think there is on the easement. But we're gonna have expense regardless.
Sure.
Because
It's
there's
gonna
gonna
cost more money down
be
the
a
road.
cost of legal expenses that go into it. But so will they, yeah. So I mean, this is to me, this is one of the most difficult types of questions, because it's a principle versus, you know, do we have some public good that comes out of the dollars that we spend. And that's where we sort of came up with, this is the best we could come up with in a bad situation.
So what it boils down to is, okay, if we look at it as a pure financial case, if we take the deal, it's this 264 plus legal expenses to close the books, right?
Yeah.
On the flip side of it, if they force us to build, it's 124 whatever plus change plus whatever legal expenses to possibly look at mitigating, find some statute of limitations. But then they still.
Wouldn't it be
or-
more than 120?
Or whatever that different, whatever it is cost to build, right?
Yeah, so
Oh, like
say
150.
$135,000 to $150,000.
So let's see.
Plus legal expenses in there. The difference between two is we end up with nothing in the
Right,
second.
we end up with nothing, right? Then a potential, like, just like the pennies on the dollar for taxes. But they've got to figure out what they're gonna do with the property.
Yeah.
Now,
Do they
there's three,
still have access to a city street?
yes. Yes, for sure, yes.
Okay.
And the access would, if they built an access, or the easement would be through the back of the north side of the courthouse.
It's an extension of, you had said Sixth Street.
Yep.
That's our street.
Isn't Sixth the
Basically
dead end? It's
comes-
that's the dead end
so
one,
All
isn't
it
it?
goes to
It
that
dead
property.
ends, and then
Yeah.
But I
there's a
didn't know
trail
if that changed.
Right.
that continues.
Over the 30
That's the
years.
easement is over the
So
trail.
so just pulling that thread a little bit, that means that, okay, let's say that they said, fine, you know what, you're forcing us to build, right? Then, you're forcing us to keep the property, then we'll force you to build the access. So we'll go start logging it. So that means the logging trucks are gonna come right down Sixth Street in front of all those homeowners. Right?
And they're all
Is that,
coming down Stoughton.
is that the,
Can't go over that bridge.
right? I'm just playing this out, right?
Yeah.
Those are what the options are, which means that we could have a whole bunch of angry homeowners.
Yeah,
Is there
I-
any consideration for like how much it would have cost to build the road had we done it, had they requested it when it was supposed to be done? Can you take that into account? Because had we done a road 30 years ago, it would have been a lot less.
Yeah, and it probably would have been a lot less to actually do it as part of the construction. of the
I
actual
didn't know if there was
road,
any like
so.
legality to that, to say, well, right, but,
Their easement just addresses access.
okay.
Yeah.
So then it'd also be inflation adjusted too, probably.
This is a little bit of an off question. I'm looking at Google Maps. The park you referenced that's named after them, that would be just north of that property, right? If I'm looking at this map
A
correctly?
little bit further, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, that
down.
literally, that would be considered a neighborhood.
It's a
Yep.
neighborhood
Park.
park, yeah.
It looks like it's got a single play set and some swings. Has there been conversations about maybe some of that profit, that I will word it as, gets put and reinvested into that park? I mean, like I said, I mean, that's actually an interesting parcel of land, because it actually is surrounded by water on two sides. I don't know, again, it's a nice ask, they can tell us no, but it would be nice to see, to try to double down on the public benefit of the bad deal.
Yeah.
And it's a legacy, it's a name legacy, it's got their name attached to that park. I'm stretching here, I get it, but I'm just trying to.
I mean, one of the things that we could do, I mean, you know, obviously this is as tough for you guys to swallow as it was for us too, as we were going through it. I mean, it's entirely possible for us to be able to go back to them and their attorney and have discussions about, hey, there's not exactly consensus on, the direction to go here, to look at, does that concern them in these discussions?
Yeah, I'm curious about where their standpoint is on negotiating on that. Because it doesn't benefit them to pay for the road to go through. So is there any sort of wiggle room from them to maybe get a portion of it, not necessarily the full thing? So they're
Well,
at least profiting a little bit.
It doesn't
from it.
benefit us, it benefits them completely. I mean, this is a strong negotiating leverage that they have in this. Because it's something that's,
If they get it.
Yeah, that's, I guess that's where my standpoint is that they're out if they don't get it, you know? And so can we say, well, we realize that we have to do this, we're having a hard time doing all of it. We can either walk away and put this in and you don't benefit at all, or you can take X.
But I think a good point was brought up that, like, okay, let's say we're forced into building this road and so they can sell it to someone else. Does that really, I mean, then I'm concerned that really for our residents putting, like I think it was you that mentioned logging trucks and stuff going down that street. That's terrifying to think about that possibility too. So, I mean, I kind of agree with where we've landed that, you know, it's not the best scenario, but to make sure there's some public good and for our residents, because I can't even imagine anything large going down that street.
So here's where I'm at right now, is that I am really not happy with the way that it's kind of an all or nothing as far as that roadway goes. But if they would be willing to meet in the middle and say, you know what, we'll split the difference of the roadway, you know, so there's the grant that was finalized, they get that. But of the difference of the roadway, that roadway cost, fine, there's part of it, but then the other half of the roadway cost goes back into like park improvements or something like that. Then they get their name in the park, they fund that, they get the tax write-off associated with it. They already have the park, but they still can have additional improvements to the park, you know, maybe it comes with a special thing for it, whatever. But then at least it's more palatable, and then they get something out of it that also gets their name, that improves their name on it. Something, I mean, just at least you come back and show some level of reciprocation that you're willing to negotiate on this. I mean, I want to at least see something with that, because right now it just kind of feels very one-sided.
Was that park for the whole family or was it just because of, was it Dick? I don't remember why we named it.
that was actually their property too.
Oh, that was their property
That was
too?
actually
Okay.
land that they farmed yearly.
Okay.
Yep,
So
that
they-
was actually the part that was actually developable.
Oh, got it,
Yep.
okay. That's why that
Because
was that way.
the other land, just year to year, it was.
And that's been pretty typical with neighborhoods that we've developed on old family
Right.
farmsteads, it's been the name of the family that's been the park name. Yeah, I mean, we certainly can go back with the message. I mean,
Are we really like, is it like is there any room left for negotiating or is it gonna be
Well,
like you said,
I think it's a
the
real
message?
strong message that you guys are sending, which quite frankly probably helps us in the discussion a little bit. You know, the only thing we can do is have the discussion and see if that changes. I mean, if it doesn't, we're sort of in the same scenario that we are now. If it does, it's something to come back with. But yeah, like I said, this is why the discussions on this have occurred for so long, is because we've really sort of come back to the same concerns that we've had too, and recognizing that there's probably a fair chance that if we don't do anything, they're probably going to come back and make the request that we build that.
Opinion question.
Yep.
In a conversation with them, would you use the word that they've negotiated in good faith? Or have they said,
Well, I think so, because.
like, or just
Yeah.
clarify, or did they say, here's what we want? I mean, was the number higher and they came down? Is it, or they just kind of been like, here's the number and here's what we want to do?
No, I think it's hard to say that they haven't been negotiating in good faith, because they have something of value that we haven't honored yet. And quite frankly, I mean, it's something that we certainly weren't aware of when we went into the process that was there, and I don't think they were either. And I think once it became apparent that that was actually official easement, it's probably not unreasonable for them to think that they want to try to get some value out of it.
But has that value number changed? Or that
No, I mean,
allocation or-
I think the way we viewed it probably has. You know, the only way we could see to actually put monetary value to it was to say, well, how much would it cost us to build that road?
When did the easement piece come up on this property? I mean, I remember the talk and, but
A year ago, year and a half ago? It's a while.
It's
We've
been a
been,
while.
I had somebody call me a couple of years ago.
yeah, we've had discussions on this for a long time.
Yeah, I would say identification of the easement and discussion about what it's worth caused significant delay in getting to this point.
Yeah, because we got that grant
I
a
was just
while
gonna say, it
ago.
looked like you guys
Yes.
had to get an extension.
Yeah,
because I mean, I thought we started out as doing them a favor by working to get this grant.
yep.
And now it just seems like things have changed rather dramatically.
Well, I think the thing that's changed is the fact that,
They don't
I
have-
think they found that they had more value and leverage here than they did before.
That hurts. I mean, that just, I'm with Mike here, and don't remember wrong, I struggle to figure out that, have we had honest and good conversations about, okay, we get it, you have the leverage point, but what's, we're helping you out, there's not a lot, there's some realities of this land, but it's also like, okay, let's think a little bit about how we can make this benefit yourself, okay, I get it, as well as more of the city versus just green land. And that's like I threw out this, random idea of the park. Because there you could see some noticeable changes and differences. And I just feel like this conversation's coming a little bit as they're walking away with a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah.
And I'd like to understand, have they thought about that? Have they thought about, hey, well, okay, could some money go to that park? Could something be done differently? Like I said, it doesn't have to be the park, for example.
To their defense, though, I think that at least the way they've expressed it to us is that they think we didn't follow our obligations.
Fair.
That we should have done this 30 years ago, and we didn't, or 25 years ago, and we didn't. And for them, at least in the discussions we've had, is that they viewed this as saying, you're fulfilling what you said you were gonna do, that you didn't do.
But only once they found out that we owed it. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, the reasoning
it's-
behind it, but that's what,
We didn't prevent anything from happening there because there was no intentions there. I mean, that's where there's a little bit of difference.
Well, and that's the difficulty, is we don't know what discussions happened back then, we don't know,
Right.
why it was never built, but I think from their viewpoint, if, at least in discussions with them, I think what they've shared with us is that they feel like we didn't fulfill our obligation that we had when we bought the land to begin with.
Procedural questions.
Yep,
If there could be a vote,
yep.
it could be voted approval, sale goes through.
Mm-hmm.
We vote no, sale can't go through,
Yep,
they could come back and say build the road.
yep.
If we get to the point where seems to be more conversation, is that a table or?
That's a table.
We would table it?
Yep, and what I would do is if you want us to do that and go down that road, I would table it to a future date. I wouldn't set that date in stone because this will take some time to go through. But if you wanted to go that option, we could table it. Just based on what I sort of hear people saying, I'm sort of thinking that that's probably the best option at this point. Because we do now have a message to bring back from the council to say, listen, this, here's where the council is at, and we need to talk about this because, this is part of the whole process.
And what's the risk on that?
I think the risk is they just tell us,
Build the road still?
yeah, they might tell us, they could do a number of things. They could say, no, we're not gonna change, or no, the property isn't for sale anymore, or I don't think they'll do that, but, I mean, they could. The only risk to me is that they'll just say, no, we don't buy your argument, and we think you have that obligation, and we're not gonna change. And then it becomes a decision back to the original discussion, is do we do it or not do it? And then, like I said, if we don't do it, and if they do pursue it, I mean, we're not gonna stop, we're not gonna stop looking at what our legal options are in that process, to see if, but that's gonna be a costly process too.
Although I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I would not feel at all comfortable voting to approve it unless a member of the family here to represent it
And
the
we can,
next time.
yep, and we can represent that too.
Yep. Yeah, I think that speaks,
Very, yeah.
and not being unfair to them
Yep.
as well tonight. But I mean, that makes an impression.
Well-
I really think it does.
I mean,
Well, they have an attorney, at least the attorney would have been here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, even beyond that, I mean, if someone's gonna hold me over the barrel, I wanna look them in the eye and understand why, you know?
Yeah.
Well, what's your thoughts here? I mean, are you thinking table? I mean, does that, or do you want to try a vote to say we want to move forward and see if there's a second?
To let staff go back and say the council feels strongly one way.
I agree, and I like well, kind of the combination of both of yours, kind of if we're gonna be put over it, maybe have part of it going towards that park, you know, as a kind of maybe a win-win in a bad situation, so.
Well, before we do that, is that something we want to do to that park? I mean, do we even have the space to do it?
Well, and I mean, we could talk about different things. I mean, just,
I don't
Yeah,
want
I guess I'm not,
I don't want to tie our
yeah,
hands.
I think what you're really saying is to have that benefit shared.
Yeah.
yeah.
Events somewhere back in the community, right?
Yep.
And the east part of Chaska downtown there did lose a park, so thinking about that and that consideration.
Yeah. No, like I said, I mean, this isn't, this is precisely why it's good to have these type of conversations as part of this, is so that, you know, I mean, there are risks and benefits involved in any direction that we go. And it's not a straightforward one, but it's worth a discussion, so.
Now, is that a motion and a second to table?
Well, it has to be made still.
Motion and a
Yes,
second.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna put it out there as whatever motion someone wants to bring forward.
So I move that we table this.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Wang,
I'd second that.
second by Councilmember McGraw to table this to a future date that is set up by administration, to whatever happens out of their conversation.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, hearing none. On the motion of tabling to a future date, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's tabled. Right. We move on to our annual 2018 financial reports.
Do you want to have one?
You okay? So, while Noel is coming to get prepared and,
Oh, I'm sorry, did you already introduce it?
yeah,
Oh,
well, don't mind,
Luke here would.
don't mind us, we're just trying to run a council meeting here while you two are having coffee
Mayor and
over
council
there.
members, the item in front of you tonight is our annual review of our audit. So this would be for the 2018 financial year, and looking at our financial reports that were published this summer for the previous financial year. Knowles Graysick, our Administrative Service Director, and Kelly Grinnell, our Finance Manager, are here to present that, along with representatives from MMKR. And just as a note, we did go over this in the work session prior to give an opportunity to a little bit more in-depth discussion. So the presentation is going to be similar, but a lot of discussion happened before. So with that, I'll turn over to Noel.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Tonight, as Matt has indicated, we're going to review the city's financial reports for the fiscal year ending 12/31/2018. Tonight, Kelly Grinnell, our finance manager, is with us. She started with the city in December, so this is the first time she's worked through the audit. Also with us tonight is Bill Lauer and Jackie Heigl, both principals with the auditing firm of MMKR. The city is under contract with MMKR to come in and perform an annual audit. Under state statutes, the city is required to have an auditor come in and review the financial operations and the financial statements and the representations made in those financial statements. The report that was published in your packet as a PDF, we refer to as the comprehensive annual comprehensive annual financial report, CAFR for short. The financial statements in here are the work product of the city of Chaska. They are our representations of the activities of the year and the financial positions as of the end of the year. So the auditors come in to then make sure that they've reviewed those and make judgments as to the assumptions we've made in terms of measuring those activities and those positions. To start off tonight, I'd like to, first of all, we're going to review two sets of reports. There's the city reports. It'll consist of the CAFR, a management report that the auditors have issued, and a special purpose audit report that'll comment on the internal controls and state compliance requirements. The second set of reports we'll review briefly are from the Chaska Fire Relief Association, their annual financial report, a management report by MMKR, and a special purpose report on internal controls and compliance. Those are included because as the pension benefit of the fire relief, the city is obligated to support that benefit, and so the fire relief is included in the city's CAFR because we are the obligating party to support that pension benefit. So we do coordinate the audit with the fire relief and the city with MMKR so that those representations can be pulled into the city's CAFR. To start with, I'd like to just review 5 quick numbers for you to set the tone of what we're going to review tonight. When we're often talking projects or budgets, we talk about a project budget for a park or for a street improvement, or if we're talking the annual budget, we're talking a fund, maybe like our electric fund or the water fund, community center fund. But if you step back and look at all of the activities that the city participates in each year, in 2018, the first number I want you to remember is $87.7 million. That's the total cost of all the services delivered by the city across its various operations. So it's a very, very significant, large operation, and I will set that as the 100% mark of the pie that we're going to split into some pieces here. The second number I'd like to note is 2/3 of that, and that's $57.7 million. Those are our enterprise fund operations. We have 9 enterprise funds. They consist of our utility funds, electric, water, sewer, stormwater, some of our recreational type enterprise funds, such as the community center, curling center, golf courses. And the intent on these funds is to recover the cost of the services delivered through the user charges. So the people who use the facilities are actually paying the fees that support those operations. If we take and look at the electric fund, it's $41.2 million. That's our largest enterprise fund, and that's 47% of the city's operations. So just less than half of what we do is primarily the electric fund itself. The general fund is the primary governmental fund of the city. This is where all of our general operations, from administration, finance, planning, economic development, public safety for police and fire, our public works department for street, snow plowing, park maintenance, as well as our park and recreation activities. It's the general fund where we have all of our governmental services that are primarily identified by the public. That fund operates at about $15.8 million, and that's 18% of the total pie of the city's operations. So less than 20% is the general fund. What's significant about the general fund is one of its primary funding sources is the tax levy. In 2018, the tax levy for the general fund was $5.4 million, and that's about 6.2% of that overall $87.7 million. So we're down to about a 6% portion of that pie. $5.4 million is a significant portion, but when you look at the entire operation, it's one piece of what we have to look at. The total levy for the city in 2018 was $8.6 million. That's 9.8% of that total pie. So less than 10% is supported by tax levy. The other 90% is supported by other activities and sources that the city manages. So it's a very significant operation, and it's that operation that gets recapped in the CAFR that we produce each year. In that report, there are 3 main sections. The first section is the introductory section. It begins on page 1, and this consists of like the letter of transmittal, which is a basic overview of what the city's functions are and what it has done over the year, the organizational chart, and then a listing of the organizational structure of the elected officials, the appointed officials, and the organizational staff of the city. The second section of the report is the financial section, It begins on page 11, and on that page is the inserted opinion from MMKR. As the auditor, they have reviewed our financial ledgers, reviewed our transactions, reviewed the financial statements that we have generated from those transactions, and issued their opinion. And MMKR is going to address this in more detail tonight. But basically, the opinion that they've put in there is what is considered an unmodified or clean opinion. And so that's the highest opinion that can be issued by the auditors at this point. So it's a critical component of our objective each year to make sure we obtain that opinion. It's also essential for some of the programs that we participate in that we'll be discussing a little bit later. Also in this section of the report is what's referred to as the MD&A, or Management Discussion and Analysis. This begins on page 15, and this is a more detailed discussion that reviews the operations of the year, looks at budget to actual variances and some of the activities that have occurred, and starts to look at some of the reasons why we're undertaking the projects and the efforts that we're doing. So if someone wants to be a little more informed about what's happening from a financial perspective, and they don't want to review all the financial statements in detail, I do encourage them to look at that MD&A section that begins on page 15. After that, we start getting into the basic financial statements. Now, on page 30 and 31, there's 2 pages, and that pretty much summarizes the entire operations of the city. We have basically a net position balance sheet that shows our positions, and then like an operating statement that shows all of our operations for the year. Our year-end net position is $197.8 million. This is an increase of about $1.8 million for the year. Our unrestricted net position, this is after we look at the revenues and expenses for the year, is about $18.7 million. There's been a change in this. It's primarily due to the fact that the city right now is financing internally several of our public improvement projects where we've used our city cash to start those projects with the intent of reimbursing ourselves for those projects from some upcoming financing when we'll be selling debt later this year. So that 2-page statement sort of summarizes the positions of the city. It's often used by several bond analysts as a way of trying to compare our city to other cities and also to other for-profit type entities. Now, governmental accounting is very different than your typical for-business type accounting. The focus of what we're trying to do on the governmental side is to show what are the resources we've collected, taxes, special assessment, franchise fees, user charges, and have we used those sources to deliver the services that we set, whether it be the public safety, the public works for snow plowing and streets, the recreational services. So in the business world, they're typically trying to measure revenues and expenses to determine a profit. We're not trying to focus on profit as much as are we using the sources the way we said we were going to do them in our budget. Now that focus does change when we look at our enterprise funds, those electric, water, sewer type operations, because in those situations we do want the user charges to cover the cost of the services. So on the entity-wide statements on page 30 and 31, we've taken the governmental focus on how we show things along with the business focus and put them into one combined statement to try to show what's referred to as the entity-wide position. And we're going to touch on that more with MMKR later. The rest of the report then gets into our major governmental funds. We touched on the general fund. At the end of the year, it had a fund balance of about $1.1 million. This is an increase of $77,000. So we did finish ahead of the budget for the year. This is a very beneficial position for us because as we are doing our bond sales, we do have our bonds rated by Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And as a part of their rating analysis, they are looking to say, they're looking at our fund balance to see, did our budget increase the fund balance, or are we drawing down against our fund balance? So having a positive gain in the fund was a good result for the year. The expenditure totals in the general fund, as we said earlier, was about $15.8 million. So about $16 million is the total for the general fund. The other major fund of several major funds is our electric fund. It had net assets of about $4.4 million. This is an increase of about $1.4 million. There was an adjustment made here for GASB 75. This is the restatement of our OPEB liability This is an accounting adjustment. MMKR is going to address this as a part of their overview. We had to make a one-time adjustment to implement some changes. The Governmental Accounting Standard Board, we refer to them as GASB, issues the governmental standards by which we have to follow in order to be in compliance with GAAP, which is a state statutory requirement. Following those major sections of the report, then, we have the notes to the financial statement. Those begin on page 45. These are the disclosure notes that go into extensive detail for anything on the balance sheet, anything on our operating statements. And when we have bond analysts at Standard & Poor's or any of the bond underwriters who are looking to bid on our bonds, they're reviewing these notes in detail to determine the financial position and the operations of the city. So if someone wants to do a detailed understanding, the notes get very technical and there's a lot of information in there. The remaining portion of the report are what we refer to as non-major funds. This is the rest of our governmental funds, things such as our special revenue funds where we have dedicated revenues. The common one that we have is our Mount Pleasant Cemetery, where we have restrictions on how those dollars can be used, so we keep track of those in a separate fund. We have our debt service funds for all of the bonds that we've sold and obligations so that we can demonstrate we're accumulating the reserves necessary to pay on those bonds. We have capital project funds, which are used to account for the sources and uses, sometimes bond proceeds, to build the projects. A common one is our current downtown street reconstruction program, where we have bond proceeds that are financing that project on an ongoing basis, and then we have to repay those bonds, and that's what those debt service funds and capital project funds are used in conjunction to account for those different activities. The rest of the funds are listed in the report. The third and final section of the report is the statistical section, and this includes oftentimes what's 10-year trend history. So you can look at 10-year revenue history, 10-year expenditure history, 10-year changes in our fund balance changes. There's also significant representations there that are used again by the bond underwriters, things such as our 10 largest taxpayers. There's also a breakdown on the staffing levels that have changed over the years based on full-time equivalents. So that 10-year trend analysis helps people understand the history of the city to give us a better sense of how we got to where we are today, and that history helps us understand as we're growing where we may be going in the future. Just a couple things I'd like to highlight quickly out of the CAFR. Our cash balance is $35.6 million. Now, that doesn't mean we have $35 million to go spend. A lot of that cash has been obligated for various restrictions. But I point this out because on page 56 through 59 of the notes, there is a table in there on page 57 which shows all of the investment positions that we had at the end of the year, and that our total of cash of $35.6 million is accounted for. This is the same table that you see each quarter as a part of our investment report to the council, so that as this changes, we're updating you quarterly on what's happening with our cash and investments. So that's just one piece of the CAFR that we report each year that you're seeing on an ongoing basis during the year. We did not issue any new bonds in 2018, but we have accumulated some of those projects as a part of the bonds that we will be selling later this year in 2019. As we look at our bond issuance, it's important to note our bond rating. Right now, with Standard & Poor's, the city rates our general obligation debt at AA stable. This is the highest rating that the city holds. It's one letter down from the AAA. I don't think we're at a AAA level right now, primarily because of our size and the amount of debt that we have outstanding, but I think that'll be something that you will see discussions in the future as we continue to grow, that there will be potentially changes for that rating to improve. But it's the highest rating that we hold right now for our GO debt. Not all of our debt is supported by general obligation. We also have some debt that the EDA has issued on behalf of the city to facilitate things like our curling arena project. That is a leased financing type debt. It's considered a little more risky. And so that's rated at AA-. That would be the normal one-step downgrade that we would expect for that type of debt. So it's still considered a high-quality debt, but because of the additional risk of a lease behind it, it's rated one step lower. We also have a rating from Moody's. That rating is on our electric revenue type debt. Moody's specializes in the electric revenue area, and they have typically rated our electric debt, which is also consistent with MMPA, who is rated by Moody's. By Moody's. Our electric revenue debt is rated as A1. It is a little different scale, but that's also a very high-quality rating for electric revenue debt. So depending on the type of debt we're issuing, there's different types of bond ratings. All of them represent a high-quality grade of investment-grade investment level. Those are just a couple quick highlights. I would like to have MMKR review their efforts, but before I do, I just want to touch briefly on the fact that the fire relief report is a second set of reports that's included as a PDF. It's a much smaller report because it's not as detailed as the CAFR, but it does represent the position of the pension for the fire relief, the operations of the fire relief, both in terms of their general fund for their general activities of the organization and their special fund, which is the pension benefit that they pay out to the members in either form of a monthly benefit or of a lump sum benefit. They have both benefit types. The pension for the fire relief is the annual contributions by the city for the pension are fully funded. And for that reason, we have disclosed in the city financial report that there's a net pension asset because we're funded slightly ahead of where we would have to be. And under the disclosure requirements, we have to show if our funding levels are ahead or behind. MMKR will discuss this a little bit further, but it is something that we lift that number from the fire relief report and bring it into the city CAFR. So MMKR performs the audit for the fire relief, and they'll be touching on that briefly tonight also. Before I have MMKR come up, are there any questions I can answer right now for you?
Anyone?
Okay. Then I'll have MMKR come up, and then I'll conclude after that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you once again for your attention this evening. As we have gone through this at some length in a workshop previously, our intent is just kind of quickly recap some of the very high points that we discussed earlier. So if I'm going too fast or you have questions, please feel free to stop me as we go forward. One thing it's our responsibility to do, Noel touched on it somewhat, is to make sure that you understand the differentiation between what our role is and what the responsibility of the city is. As Noel mentioned, that CAFR document that you received, all of the financial statements, the schedules, the data, the disclosures in there, the responsibility for that information rests with the city. We come out and perform our audit process to provide an opinion as to whether it fairly presents the city's financial position at the end of the year and the results of your financial transactions for the year under audit. The city also has an audit under government auditing standards, so we test and review your internal controls over compliance, putting that information together, and compliance for putting that information together, provide a separate audit letter as to whether or not there are any issues with that. Finally, we audit your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations. There is a compendium of laws all cities have to comply with that is put out in an audit guide by the state auditor's office. We audit to that guide and provide an additional letter as to your compliance in that area. As far as the results of the audit, as we discussed in workshop, is very positive from a results standpoint, about as clean an audit as you can get. As Noel mentioned, the opinion that we issued once again is an unmodified or clean opinion. We had no issues there. We did add this year, you'll see in your financial statement, a paragraph in that opinion calling out that accounting change for implementing GASB 75 on your other post-employment benefits. That does result in the restatement of your beginning net position entity-wide on that first set of financial statements Noel talked about, where you have all of your fund information put together in a single presentation. that reduced your beginning net position by about $375,000. Your total liability for other post-employment benefits at the end of the year was about $1.2 million, just to give you some perspective. From the results of the other letters that we issued, again, very, very good results. We had nothing to report as far as any internal control or compliance issues with your financial reporting. And we had a clean report also on your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations. As far as the fire relief audit report that we issued, again there, we were able to provide a unmodified opinion on your pension plan there, and that plan did end the year with total net assets of just under $5.6 million in cash and investments at the end of 2018. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, and she is going to go just very briefly over a couple of the high-level numbers, to give you some examples of what Noel was discussing.
The first table we have here shows the governmental funds of the city and the change in the fund balance from 2017 to 2018. The top part of the table shows by classification the restricted fund balances, committed, assigned, unassigned, and then the bottom portion shows by fund. So the change in fund balance from 17 to 18 was a decrease of about $10.3 million. Majority of that decrease is in the public improvement and the capital project fund area, and that's just due to various capital outlay and project costs during the 2018 year that hadn't received the funding sources as of year end, but will in future years. This graph shows the general fund financial position for the last 5 years, showing the fund balance, the cash balance, and then also the revenue balances. Total general fund cash and investments was about $2.2 million, slight increase of about $6,000 from the prior year. Total fund balance was about $2.1 million. That was an increase of about $77,000 from the prior year, which was consistent with the budgeted increase in the general fund. Next graph here shows the general fund revenues showing budget to actual. Total general fund revenues are about $15.7 million. Overall, about $233,000 under the final budget. A couple areas, license and permits were under budget about $515,000, lower than anticipated building activity. And that was offset by tax revenues, or about $150,000 over budget. That graph is similar, just showing the general fund expenditures comparing budget to actual. Total general fund expenditures were about $15.8 million. That was within about $17,000 of the final budget, so within 1/10 of 1% of the city budget. There's various areas here up and down. The public safety was about $326,000 over budget, mainly in the police services and fire protection departments. Public works was about $240,000 over budget. And then these were offset by the general government was about $325,000 under budget with the unspent budgeted contingency. And Parks and Recs was about $226,000 under budget. And then the last slide we have here shows the enterprise funds of the city, showing the changes in the net position from 2017 to 2018. Once again, the top part shows it by classification, the investment in capital assets, restricted and unrestricted net position, and then the bottom portion shows it by the funds. So the total net position for the 2018 year increased just over $1 million. If you're looking down by fund, the majority of that's in the electric fund, which you can see increased about $1.3 million from the prior year. I just want to point out there's some of the recreation funds of the city, you're seeing decreases there. Just pointing out that the rates for some of these recreation funds aren't intended to cover the depreciation.
Yeah, that's, we pointed out during the work session, but so the question came up, like the curling center. So those are operationally self-sufficient funds. The debt service and depreciation are covered through a separate fund or a community building fund. The one that actually had the operating an operating loss was in the community center. The one thing I will point out they did during the work session is a lot of our general park and rec functions are covered through the community center. And if you look at our per capita spending compared to a statewide average, I think we said it was $114 statewide average for park and rec per capita revenue generated for that. We generate about $42 per capita. So we actually levy quite a bit less on the taxes, which puts more pressure on our community center. I think that's one that we're going to have to continue to look at in the future because obviously the facility itself is going to need investment back into it, especially since it's hitting 30 years old in 2 years. So.
That was all of the numbers we'd intended to go through. Any other questions or anything you wanted to discuss further?
I don't know. I don't have any other, I mean, anyone else? Again, like I said, we've kind of been through this before and earlier today, so questions, there are a lot of questions there, but I think we're good here.
Turn it back over to Noel then.
Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to highlight in the CAFR, it's on page 7, there's this award here that has been issued by the Government Finance Officers Association of America and Canada. This is the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence Financial Reporting, This is a special program that they sponsor for government entities who prepare a CAFR that go above and beyond the normal governmental gap disclosures, but also commit to producing the full CAFR, which includes the MD&A section, the statistical section, and a more complete representation as a way of trying to put more information out there that a broad spectrum of readers, whether it be the citizens or an analyst, can actually get a better understanding of the city's operations. This is a program that GFOA has sponsored for many years. The city has participated in this program for 29 years. The 2017 CAFR was awarded the certificate, and that's what's included in this CAFR. The staff has submitted this report for review as a part of the 2018 CAFR. I would anticipate that we'll probably receive that certificate again. One of the reasons we do this is also it helps with the bond rating process because it starts to tell the bond rating agencies what the standard is. Because of the total governmental entities, cities, counties, school districts, states, there's a total of 52,228 entities in the United States that are eligible for this. Last year, for 2017, only 4,328 certificates were issued. So that means the city was one of 8.3% of the possible entities that were eligible to receive this certificate. When you look at Chaska in cities in the nation, we'd be in the top 5.8%. So there's only 2,098 cities in the nation that receive this certificate. And in the state of Minnesota, there's only 102 cities in the state. So that puts us in the top 3.9% of the cities in the state. So it does, when an analyst opens up the report, when they see this, they have an understanding of what has gone into preparing this report and the commitment that it represents. The other reason we enjoy participating in this program at the staff level is we do get feedback from 3 independent reviewers who have reviewed the CAFR against the program details, and they make recommendations on changes we would have to make in the program, in our CAFR to be in compliance with the GASB pronouncements and other industry standards. So it's a great outside review process that we participate in each year to continue and maintain the standards of the report itself.
But the most important part is that that's year number 30.
29 years. We're
29
flying for
years
30.
that they've been that they've got this. So it's a big deal. I think Noel's right. It goes really into the pride and effort that the finance department puts into doing that, and I think it adds some real benefit to us especially when we're going through bond rating process. Because I sat in on those bond rating calls, and they have some pretty detailed questions, and it's pretty easy to be able to go back through this report and give them the information that they want instead of having to dig through and find information that might otherwise be difficult to get. So it ends up being a big deal in the long run of information. Good information does translate to better processes with the rating agencies.
So the CAFR is available at the city website, plus several prior years are available there from a historical perspective. A summary of it was published in the Chaska Herald earlier in July. That's in compliance with the state statute requirement that we publish a summary every year in our legal newspaper. A copy is downstairs in the Chaska Library, and it's available for anybody here who wants to come to City Hall and look at the report.
I think Kevin has it checked out now.
It's great reading before bedtime, I guarantee you that. To conclude, though, I do want to acknowledge Kelly and the finance staff. They have worked all year on this. There's a lot of commitment all year to try to do their jobs to the very best they can. We work with the city staff to develop a budget and then work with that staff to follow that budget through the year. Significant recognition goes to Kelly, who's new since December. This is her first time through the process. She has worked very closely with Lisa Nelson, who's been a longtime employee of the city and is now in our role as a controller. She worked significantly with MMKR to complete the audit and the financial report this year. In addition, the other department heads and city staff, we all participate trying to maintain the budgets, and we start the whole process really with the budgeting, because that's where we start to document what we're trying to accomplish, what are the services we're delivering, and the resources we'll need to deliver those sources. Matt leads that process, and we're looking forward to starting it up here as we move into the fall, so that we
this
can
is
bring that.
always, to me, this is like Thanksgiving is to Christmas. You know, this is, this is the beginning of the budget process, our fun budget process in the fall. So we, the second meeting in December, we'll have a work session, and I think we're planning on the 30th as a potential date that we'd actually have as the date that we'd set our preliminary levy.
Pending the phone call tomorrow at 10:30.
Okay. It's either the second or third meeting of September that we do that, but this really is the, sort of the beginning of that budget process is this.
So with that, if there are no other questions, I would ask that there's a motion before you to accept the city and fire relief reports.
I make a motion to accept the annual 2018 financial report.
I will second the motion, and thank you to the city staff for doing an outstanding job as always, and thank you to our auditors for.
Wait, there's a motion and a second, then you can speak.
Okay.
Sorry.
Motion by Councilmember.
That's gonna be a finding in next year's audit.
Talking too much.
Councilmember Hubbard, second by Councilmember White. Now you can have
So,
discussion.
thank you. Thank you for thank you to city staff for doing an excellent job as always, and thank you to our auditors for doing such a thorough job each year, so appreciate it.
Yes, thanks, Noel, Kelly, on your first time through this craziness. She's still smiling, so it must have been not too bad. Anyone else? Okay, I got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
All right, moves us on to item number 9, bills. Anyone have any questions? Mike?
Just a few, just 4, I'm only 4, I'm keeping it short. Let's see, page 10.
Mine's still.
So, on page 10, there was like a 15,000 total for Gardner, for Fairway Drive drainage. Is that just maintenance or special circumstance?
No, that's general maintenance out of the
Okay.
course. That's, drainage is probably the biggest, one of the biggest issues they deal with at the town course.
Yes,
so.
that's the normal thing,
Yep.
okay. And then, Hawk Analytics on page 12, that's Cell Hawk contract renewal. And it's, I'm trying to understand what that one was for, because we have, like, you know, there's other, like, bills for, like, normal cellular, but Cell Hawk doesn't ring any bells.
I was just looking at Nate, because does that have to do with our cell lease renewals?
That's not familiar to me.
Yeah, we'll check into that. So Cell Hawk, all right.
Yeah.
What page was that on?
Analytics.
Yeah.
It's,
I think I can answer that one.
Oh.
That's the investigative tool that the Chaska Police Department uses.
Oh, okay.
So okay.
That masked man was Kevin Wright.
I want to know if Tracy had the answer or Kevin did.
Thank you very much for that.
Whoa, it's actually kind of interesting if you want to go read about it.
Huh. I will have to Google that. So let's see. On page 17, there's a Met Council has 17,000 for SAC charges. Just
So SAC charges are sewer access charges.
that's right.
Yep, and so that's always associated with whatever permits that we pull, we collect the SAC fees or whatever permits are pulled from us for buildings each month. We have a bill that we have to pay to the Met Council for the number of SAC units that they're responsible for that building. So we collect the fees and we have to pay it to the Met Council. So we're in essence a conduit.
So this is basically a pass-through
Yep.
of the charges for sewer treatment.
Sewer treatment. Yep, and basically every building when it comes in gets a SAC determination from the Met Council, and based on that, they have to pay a certain number of SAC units, which each one has a value of $4,000 to it, basically. Yeah.
Gotcha.
If you're getting sack and whack charges, you're never happy.
No, you should be though, or else you wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom.
Well, yeah, that way, but you don't like paying it.
Yeah.
Or you got your
Nobody likes
assessors.
paying it up front.
Yeah. And then the last one is, there was on page 28 to 29, under Stuart Irby, there was 118,000 for like a bunch of like switch cabs and stuff. That's
Mine keeps doing it too.
Oh, so that's equipment for the electric department. That's their switch cabinets.
gotcha.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
Anyone else? All right, I'd entertain a motion to pay the bills.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Wang,
Second?
second by Councilmember Hatfield to pay the bills. Discussion. Nate, we call roll?
Yes, Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Yes.
Councilmember Draw.
Yes.
And Mayor Winchell.
Yes. All right, moves us to other business. How about Councilmember Hatfield?
Yeah, I have a few things. Where do I start? Wednesday, the Highway 10 Corridor Study Open House is from 5 to 7 at the Community Center. So that's an event that'd be good for anyone interested in that to go to. I was watching the park board meeting and they've been working on a park inventory, and it's actually really cool to go online now and you can look at our different parks and some of them list amenities and pictures and things. So I thought that was a really cool map that they had done, and so anyone interested in parks.
It's actually our intern this summer in the Park and Rec Department that's been her project the entire summer.
It's really nice to just like be able to click on things and see it all. So that's something definitely to check out. And with that, the activity guide came out. I meant to bring it, but definitely lots of exciting activities in there. The elimination of park fees for Carver County, I thought was really exciting. Anytime you can go to a park and it's free, that's amazing. So December 1st, not all, the certain Carver County parks, just the ones that had charges, are gonna be free. So that was an exciting thing that came out of the Carver County board lately. And the Chaska Cubs, I don't know about baseball, but it looks like they're doing something really good. Like they're doing-
Winning's good.
Right. I've, been following along.
So I'll help you. They won their first round.
Right, so they're like moving on, like these are good
State
things.
tournament, and then now they play next weekend.
How many more times do they have to play to win the whole thing?
Labor Day weekend is the final, right?
Labor
Okay.
Day weekend's final.
Okay, well, I thought that was
But it was
exciting.
single elimination the first game, now it's double elimination.
I'm not
so.
sure what that means, but exciting that they're doing that.
They play Saturday in Dassel.
And I'll let you, are you gonna bring up the fire department AEDs?
They're actually gonna come.
They're gonna come and do a
Okay, I don't wanna steal
presentation.
anyone's
I
thunder
actually
then,
thought they were
but I
coming
think
tonight, but they are gonna come.
Okay, well, if they're
Yeah.
coming, then I
Yeah.
won't steal that thunder. But that's all I had then, I think. Yep.
Okay. You're up.
Me? All right. Couple of events that happened between now and then. The Night to Unite. I'm sure everybody went out to some of their neighborhoods. I visited a couple of mine in my ward. it was a beautiful night and met a lot of neighbors, answered some questions, and got lots of hospitality. So, and I have to give a special thanks to the police department and the fire department, both neighborhood gatherings I went to, they each showed up. So I got to see McGruff and, you know, the different fire trucks, and the firemen even let some of the ladies try on his gear. And it was kind of, it was really neat, you know, just to see, and they, you know, just to let people come into the police car, you know, look around and things, so.
I think there was
They are very excited about that.
56. Yeah, there's over 50 neighborhood parties this year, which is the most
Yeah.
that I think we've
McGruff
ever
looked
had.
a little wiped out at the town forest out there, but it was a great night and a fun event. So it's just hard. You want to hit them all. So that was my only like bummer about that. But otherwise, it was great. Touch a Truck just happened this last week.
Last Thursday.
That was a blur. Great weather for that. Just a nice gathering of people, and I brought my son, and he was not interested in touching any trucks. So
Really?
yeah, he just wanted to play in the playroom at the community center. But anyways, it was a great event and a fun time. Just constituent stuff, but questions were answered by you, Nate. So golf cart ordinance stuff coming up, yard waste questions. And I will be attending the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District boat tour. Oh, I had to write that down because it's a mouthful. So I think that's it for me.
Michael?
All right, so the Touch a Truck event I went to as well, that was like really well attended this year. I don't know, like the attendance was about the same. We were pretty comparable last year. It was really, really solid attendance, you know, fantastic event. The neighborhood watch is something that I want to bring up. It wasn't necessarily, this was something that we had hosted one in our neighborhood because we had a burglary in our neighborhood. And because of that, you know, we got together with our neighbors and hosted a neighborhood watch meeting with the police department. As part of that, there was a lot of great information. So one of the things we did learn was that when there was a string of burglaries, none of the neighborhoods that had a neighborhood watch sign got hit. There are all neighborhoods without the neighborhood watch sign. So if there's any incentive to not get burglarized, and it's a great incentive to get together with your neighbors, call the police department to have a neighborhood watch meeting. It doesn't cost you anything. There's only 2 meetings a year with your neighbors. One of them, 19 night, counts as one of those meetings. So highly, highly recommended. A lot of good information. In addition to like the burglaries here in Chaska, like one night in Victoria, they said 17 homes were hit in the same night. So, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, if, you know, that news hasn't gotten around, people should be aware that the burglars who are hitting Chaska aren't from here. They come from other places, as Officer Janke described it. They come to Chaska because we are a friendly, safe community where we trust each other, that we trust that, you know, our neighbors won't break into our homes and steal stuff from each other. But the downside is that because we're trusting of our own neighborhood, people from other places where there's more crime say, hey, that's easy pickings, because they know that we're such an open, trusting community. So, certainly want to pass that along to everybody. I wanted to add on to Councilmember Hatfield's note about the Highway 10 corridor study. That covers from Highway 43 in Western Lake Township to Highway 61. So if you live anywhere in that corridor, it's a really great event to attend, an open house to learn about that project, as they're just getting started with that in the kind of that gathering phase.
But isn't this a listening session?
It's a
Isn't this
listening,
more
yep.
looking for?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So that's why it's great to get involved right at the beginning, because if there's input, now's the time to get your input into that. So
That's it. They sort of did the same thing with staff too, where they sit down and get sort of our initial comments on things that are of big concern to us. I mean, obviously in Chaska, we have a big concern with the section between Bavaria and 41. I mean, that's a big area. Or the area, you know, by the community center, we don't have off-road trail section. You know, we talk about how is 10 and 61 going to come together in the future. You know, there's more priority on Highway 10 than there is on Highway 61, and so that changes that intersection potentially. potentially. So there's a number of things that they're focusing on, and that's a really broad range of development patterns that happen on that corridor. And Highway 10, will be the corridor for the county as we go into the future.
Drive it every day.
Yep, exactly. Let's see, so, Chaska Farmers Market, I was at the farmers market last Wednesday. It's, the turnout's really solid, and it's like still a lot of people coming. I think one of the good litmus tests of, successful events, including farmers markets, is that if you're there at closing time and they haven't started packing up half an hour early, that it's a good event. And you know what? It was like closing time and people were still coming in, and then a lot of people were still trying to sell stuff and, and offer their goods and stuff. So it was really, really good to see that, that people are excited about it and people are coming. The parking definitely was worked out well, and it was good to see that positive traffic, and everyone seemed to be really enjoying it, so.
Are they still doing those themed events? Did that go through?
They determined that they weren't able to get the acts that they wanted to for this year, but they're gonna do it next
Okay,
year. So
just curious. I didn't hear anything more about it. So.
Yep.
Yep, the Chaska History Center.
I looked it up, but I didn't see anything.
Sure. The Chaska History Center event, World War I and World War II, that's still going on through November 15th. I saw in your report that October 22nd is that Marnita's table.
Yep.
And you'll probably talk about that a little bit more later, I'm guessing, right? Or
Yeah, well, what I will say is that, so we set the date, and we've generally had a meeting, but our planning meeting, I think, is coming up next week. It's like, what?
Yeah, I was trading emails on confirming that today.
Yeah, so we're gonna have more details after that. The one thing we wanted to do is just get a date on the calendar, just to get it set, and then more details will come out after our planning meeting next week.
So one question, just a kind of a casual question about it was, just generally, like, because my understanding was that it's supposed to bring people together over food and discussion and, and interaction. So it's one of those things, it's a community-wide event, right? So to kind of bring people together. And so what's the general format, though, to kind of incite discussion?
So that's what we're gonna find out more about. You were at the last meeting. I don't know if you can get into some of the details of that.
Yeah, the general format is pretty close to what you're describing, Mike, is really, having it open to the community, anyone's welcome to attend. We want a good, diverse participation across the community. And, try to encourage folks who maybe don't know each other as well to sit next to each other at the table, enjoy a meal together, and then have focused conversations about, topics that are relevant to the community. So in this case, it's really gonna be focused on topics of equity and race and, diversity in Chaska, and talking about that, hopefully coming out of the discussions with some ideas of things that we should be doing as a community. So I think that the goal is that we're not only having a productive conversation and bringing people together, but we're coming out of it with things that can be acted on, going forward. So it'll inform, not only the school district, but also the city, but I think the community as a whole. So it's not necessarily geared towards just things that government agencies can do, but the people who live here and the businesses that are here and, the community. So that's the general concept of it.
Very cool. Okay, a couple questions, or a few questions. So I've been asked by a few people about the intersection by Pioneer Trail by Quick Trip. So that's a Carver County jurisdiction. I know that's not our jurisdiction, but, I know people ask about it because the traffic's still there. And so, and we had heard that, yeah, something is gonna be done about that because it's a bad intersection. But the summer's mostly through, so just kind of wondering if there was any news on that.
Yeah, we've had some good discussions about that. The general direction I think they're gonna go is I think they're gonna extend the actual median back to where those cones are.
So they're not gonna open it up, they're gonna close it more.
No, I didn't say I agreed with,
Right. No,
but it's becoming pretty clear to me that they have no intention of opening that up more. Now, what they'll say is that that turn lane, left-hand turn lane goes right through the entrance into, not Quick Trip, but the one that sort of goes between Quick Trip and New Horizons. And that to put a turn lane in there would put a left-hand turn lane into another left-hand turn lane, and to me, the reality is that always existed like that. And it's not a perfect solution, but they seem pretty unwilling to go down that direction. So I think what you'll end up seeing is that they'll just put a more permanent barrier to the temporary barriers that are there now.
So that'll be interesting, because that Jonathan Flats is grand openings this Thursday, right? So,
Yeah.
Wednesday, so now.
I
that's
think
gonna
it'll be easier for them because they're up next to that entrance, that exit that's up to north right now. Who I think it continues to impact and will is Quick Trip. I mean, because people are using their entrance as if it's an entrance to Jonathan Square, which they almost sort of have to.
Now, I was just gonna ask that question. Somebody told me that that piece of concrete there was part of the public roadway. I can't see that. Or it's part of accessing that area. I mean, it's not a city street by any means, but is that not true, or is that?
No, that's a private road through there. You're talking about the one between Quick Trip and New Horizons?
Yeah, but where you make that turn now, and you go, and then you gotta take a left and go to the Dairy Queen, and.
Yeah.
But that isn't a public.
And when they look at access issues, this is something we talk about quite a bit when we go through condemnation is, they view, loss of access only if you don't lose all access, not full access.
Wow.
Yeah, I commented last summer. I made that trip every day to, school year, actually, not last summer, last school year, because I would find myself weaving through Quick Trip, take a left to go out on 41, and felt uncomfortable every time doing it.
Yeah. No, to me, you deal with an imperfect situation there and
Say
just
that's a
put it.
private road too?
Yeah, but it's more the access that the county's concerned about than the road itself.
Interesting, okay.
So, before you go, are they planning on doing that?
I haven't heard, where we left it was just them basically telling us that they wouldn't consider something else. As far, we can find out when they're gonna do it.
Well, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not,
Yeah,
it is what it is.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, and then I understand there's some of the utility work on Lyman over by 41 has started, but my understanding is that the funding for actually doing the road work hasn't arrived, so this is just pre-work.
Yep.
So, and then
Yeah,
after
so
that
the road stuff was more of the county and a lot of it was their cost share agreement with the city of Chanhassen. And, but the utility work was stuff that we had already programmed and planned on doing this summer. It's really sort of a separate project than the road. What it'll do next summer is it'll potentially help that project get expedited in timing by us getting this utility work done now.
Do we get paid for that, moving that?
No,
Just you have to do it.
because we were on Minnesota Valley poles up there. It wasn't our right of way.
So it was just out of necessity, we had to move it.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily moving as much as burying it.
Oh.
So when you have a roundabout, they won't have the overhead lines that go over the top of a roundabout. They have to be buried.
So that way you won't have like a rollover, chipping over a line or catching, snagging in something.
Yeah, or especially when you're coming out of an industrial park, the height of it or things like that. But yeah, they require that the utilities get buried when it's a roundabout.
Okay, gotcha. So then we still have yet to secure the final funding for that.
That's a county project. So this is,
the county does,
yep,
right,
this
yeah,
is
yeah.
just ours, the utility work. There's only a very small component of that project that's the city of Chaska, and it's basically just our cost share contribution to the project. Most of the funding is coming from Carver County and the city of Chanhassen.
So, and then, but have they secured most of the funding they'll need for for that work, or is it still?
Well, the county has theirs.
Okay.
Chanhassen had sought bonding dollars last year through the legislature to cover their costs, and they were not successful in that.
So it's still up in the air as to whether
The
that's.
county didn't do it because the numbers were real high.
Yeah. because
Yeah,
they-
that's another part of it is that they're, yeah.
So they decided, my understanding is they're splitting the project, so it's supposed to help them in the costing of it.
They can
But
like. rebid it
the
or
numbers came like 15% high
something. Yeah.
than what they anticipated, so that was kind of why they chose not to do it.
Yeah, because they were gonna rebid that or something.
They're gonna try to rebid it differently
Yeah.
in segments or something. I don't, I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay. Then they see the 21244 interchange is coming along really nicely. I'm wondering what's the time frame for that, like wrapping up? Because I see like curbs there, so they're laying down asphalt and.
I'd say mid-November is a timeframe for when they'll all be completed, just that phase of it. But what it'll do is when they do 44 going to the south, then that'll be the access for the neighborhoods then to go out that way next summer.
Cool. So it'll be great for everyone who lives in that area. So, very cool. And then the last thing is that, you mentioned the police thing, earlier. I remember it used to be like a police blotter or something that was, like, I know like the police department used to send out like a newsletter or something, used to say like, here's the stuff that happened in like the past week. And is there something like that still available someplace?
We switched over to more like Facebook type
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
That we do and we do that more as the, more on a topical basis as things come up.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know if there's a blotter or not on
The
there. I could
reason,
check.
the reason why I asked is
What was it
because.
called, Tracy? What did that used to be called? The Fort,
The 411, that's it,
411.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you were just talking about an Herald versus like police reports.
No. It's
oh
the
yeah, that kind of
411.
disappeared too.
Yeah, because
But that's more like Carver County, right?
because of just like the stuff that's been going on, I was like, I wonder kind of what else is going on around the city and kind of hear things, but there was like when the burglary happened in our neighborhood, we all are expecting to see it in the newspaper, and there was like nothing. So it's like, okay, you're just kind of wondering kind of what's going on. I think, it'd be really helpful from at least a council perspective, to have a little bit of a pulse of kind of what's happening out there in terms of, crime rates and things like that. Because, undoubtedly if like someone in our neighborhood gets hit or something like that, or in our ward gets hit, it'd be nice to know like, oh, there's areas that may need more support or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or just at least be aware of it, so we're not finding out from someone who's, is like, hey, I need help with this, right?
Yep. Okay.
So,
That's a good
and that's-
point, Mike. That was a good transparency tool for the police department too, I thought. Because they'd like announce promotions and things like that in there too. It was always a good tool. I might be a little biased. I think my mom started it.
So, yes, so that's all I got.
Okay.
Just two things. Almost everyone said, but I'll talk about Touch a Truck again. I tell my children that it's my favorite event for Park and Recs, personally. And I'm a big, I'm a big kid. It was the first time in 12 years I did not have to serve hot dogs. Beautiful weather. I mean, I have to borrow a statement made, it's one of the happiest days in Chaska. Just to see families and kids. And the thing that always strikes me, and I actually missed from this year from serving hot dog, the thing that always strikes me from the event is when you're serving a hot dog or giving the ice cream and the popcorn, there's a parent there going, well, how much does this cost? And you can say, there's no cost. And they look at you like, that's not true, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And I think that is, you chalk it up there as one of those things that, it supports the mission of Chaska, is you have events like that that bring people together to look at equipment. Think about that for a minute, and interact with some of the teams and events, everything like that, and it's free, and it's outside, and it was a beautiful night. So can't say enough about Touch a Truck. I did kind of personally miss serving hot dogs, and I reminded them, and they said, you can jump right in. And I said, oh, there's my kids, there they go. So, but it was also nice to attend for the first time in 12 years with my family, so that was good. And then just kind of kudos, 2 weeks ago, I talked about the water shutdown. Nate and I exchanged some emails. You conveniently went on vacation. So associated with that sign.
I know when to leave.
But I will point out that I thought the communication with the mailings, the Facebook pages was great. You know, the early signage kind of sparked the interest, but the follow-ups were great. I also think the follow-up on the thing is about 1:10, I believe, when the message went out saying water's back on, which I believe was, you know, the rough estimate was 5. I think that was probably.
party.
You thought of that, we could have had our party. So, we did have a successful party on Sunday. My son actually turns 7 this coming Friday, so, but I just thought it was good because, people saw the Facebook message, especially when it was posted, you know, and did the right thing. So I just think, as much as the city tried to avoid a major inconvenience, to communicate effectively and then just get the work done and let people know, hey, your water's good, was appreciative, so. That is all I have.
Okay. Luke? And Matt?
Nope.
Did you do anything this week?
We sold our house today.
Congratulations.
Now we only live a half a block away here.
Move already? and
Yeah.
everything? Well,
Already out.
you were
Alright.
busy then.
Yeah.
I had a question from the biweekly. Do we know, are the September 9th and 16th meetings, talk about work sessions, are those like during, when the normal meeting would be, or do we have times for those?
Yeah, so, I, sort of what I was talking about with Noel's here, we might actually do the work sessions on the 16th and the 30th.
Okay.
And what we do is we'd have them from 6 to 7. Or a lot of times what I like to do is start at 5:45 because everybody likes to talk a little bit. And by the time we get going, it's 6 o'clock. So, you know, probably business from like 6 to 7 and stuff. But typically those work sessions, budget ones are about an hour.
Okay.
So we're not gonna have a council meeting on the 9th then?
No, I think we'll have a council meeting, but we're thinking about having the actual budget work sessions on the 16th. And
And that's gonna lead into mine, because that's fire department open house.
Oh,
Be nice for us to be able to attend that.
oh, that's good to know. Yeah.
So that's on the 9th, and that's from, I don't know,
3 to
5.
7 or something?
I don't think it's 3.
Oh, I thought
Probably 5 or 4, probably 5 to
I put it
8.
in the calendar, but yeah.
Mr. Wright, do you know when the fire department time of the open house is? You can just shoot it up, I won't make you run up here, unless you wanna see your pretty face.
It's 5 to 8, I believe.
So 5 to 8, so,
So try not to have a work session on that night.
yes,
Yeah, I
that's
gotcha.
perfect. At
Yeah.
least we can be there until 6:30-ish, and then, at least.
With
that's-
3 meetings, we may not need to have 3
We
meetings.
don't need
that
the
month.
9th, that would
So,
even be
We'll
better.
check into that, but we definitely can keep it open from a work session.
But,
So,
yeah, okay.
okay.
Can you also include like a reminder in the next one for that, the fire department, the open house, because I didn't have that on my radar, so.
What do you think I'm here for?
Well, besides you.
I actually had that one down.
Okay.
All right. So you're done. Did you get your question answered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything, sir?
I'm good.
Nate?
Nothing.
Nothing. All right, the only thing I had was meetings. We already talked about that. We're gonna move it. Fire department open house is the 9th. Labor Day, we won't have a meeting, obviously, on Labor Day, so, enjoy your day off, I hope. And, hope the weather's nice. You never know. You never know. With that,
It could snow.
yeah, it could snow.
Oh, no.
Don't say
Yeah, with that, just
Don't say that word.
check our website whether or not we'll have a meeting on the 9th. Right now, it's uncertain. For sure, the 16th, and if we don't have it on the 9th, then we'll probably have it on the 30th.
Yep.
So, and for us, we'll just have to keep track of our work sessions. We have our city retreat, the 19th and the 20th, so don't forget that. Coming up, we would have a meeting prior to that, so. All right, unless anyone has anything else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Motion by Councilmember Wang,
Second.
second by Councilmember Hatfield to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. We adjourned. Have a good night. Thanks for being here.